I want to try to have a quick summary at the front of the video because it's a long one, unfortunately. So I'm currently in talks with someone over at Bamboo to see if I can get this thing fully repaired into a fully working state again. So first thing they told me to do was rebuild it back to the best of my ability to where I can get it kind of working. That is what I've done. I'll be linking this video in with the reply I do to them. So to the person helping me over at Bamboo, I do want to apologize for the length of the video, and I do want to apologize for, let's be honest, you're probably going to see a few of the other videos, especially that one of where I just had my moment with my printer. I do very much want to apologize for that. With that said, I think I actually know exactly what happened with this printer, and unfortunately, just replacing the hot end would have not resolved the issue. I'll talk about that in a little bit, but first things first, I want to talk about what exactly I've done with this thing and kind of show it working. So again, I got it back more or less back to the way it needs to be for testing purposes. The motherboard, the MOSFETs that normally have a little heatsink on them, the heatsink is not there anymore because when I had my moment, I also ripped off one of the ground planes that the bolts go into for the heatsink. So those MOSFETs are not properly cooled. So I really can't run this thing for long, but I can run it for long enough just to show generally everything's kind of working and kind of not. With that said, another thing I've done is since I cut the cabling for the heat bed right here, I just did this right here. Yes, this is not how you're supposed to do it. This absolutely needs to be replaced. And whenever I do eventually go for like the full replacement parts like I'm planning to, the heat bed is definitely one of the parts I'm very much replacing. But as per the request, I got it back into a workable state again. Another thing to note is the USB-C cable for the for the tool end here is one of my own personals. I had to flip it around a few times, but I finally got the tool head to finally recognize, kind of. I'll show you what I mean by that in a little bit. And I also cut this cable right here, so I just reconnected those. This motor does work. This motor here works fine, and of course the bed motor works completely fine. The heat bed itself actually still fully works too, which is kind of impressive. But again, per the request, it is back and rebuilt to the best of my ability. So with that said, here's what happens when I turn it on. I hear the clicking. And then eventually, it's in SAD mode. And if I hit that, toolhead malfunction. So it's asking me to restart it. So for the giggles, I'll just restart it. Again, all the clicking and whatnot from the motors or stepper motors. I get the chime. And it does it yet again. So clearly there's something wrong with the stepper motor. There are other issues plaguing this thing, but for right now, priority one for replacement parts for me is the tool head. So with that said, so what I'm going to do first is I'm going to hit control. I'm going to press down on the extruder. It's going to tell me to heat up the extruder. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to hit still load. As you can see, the motor is still spinning. So at the very least, it is making proper contact, and I heard it click again like I was trying to grab something. So there's something in here that's still jamming. With that said though, another issue I've experienced is the temperature is not correct. Now the heat bed here is a little warm because I initially tried recording this part of the video and I didn't like how it came out, so I'm recording it again. But the heat bed does work. So if I actually bring my little temperature probe here, you can see it's at nearly 100 degrees Fahrenheit. So even though the wiring solution I have is not how you're supposed to do it, it at the very least shows that the heat bed here still works. But of course, this guy here is having his issues like I mentioned. So obviously the temperatures are wrong. So let's say I want to crank it to about 150. So it's going to try and heat the nozzle up. At some point, it'll start making like little whiny noises. I don't know if you'll be able to hear it or not, but I'm able to hear it. Probably because I'm autistic and for some reason or other it helps me hear high-pitched noises. I don't know. But now I'm hearing that ringing noise this thing's making. I don't know where exactly the ringing is coming from. I don't know if it's because this fan is trying to spin and it's not spinning. I don't know if it's coming from the board right here, but it's doing something. And of course, there's no temperature readout here. But that's with that said, it is still producing heat. So give me a second. Here's a little stick thermometer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the probe end, put it to right there, and as you can see, it is slowly rising. So the hot end is very much being able to heat up properly. The little I forget what it's called that produces the heat, but that part is still working completely fine. But whatever is used to monitor the heat does not work. So that's issue number one. Issue number two is this fan don't spin. And what makes it even weirder is if I go to this one right here, which is this guy right here. That one's working completely fine. So, I mean, if it is already obvious, this thing very much has its issues still. So I'm going to dump this back to 0. And considering I'm really not meant to have this thing up and running for that long, I'm actually just going to shut it off and let it cool and come back. With everything cooled down, I now want to quickly talk about my tool end. Now, I mentioned this in the video a little later on, but again, now with everything cooled down, I want to bring in the tool head real quick. I want to try and keep everything short like I mentioned, but I don't think that would be possible. But with that said, I did talk about this in depth, or at least, well, yeah, in depth in the later on in the video, but I want to bring it up here also. So what do I think actually caused my printer to stop working right? The tool end got bent. What would happen is that throughout my prints, it will occasionally collide with the supports and sometimes even the outer walls of whatever I'm printing. Now, at the time, I thought that was normal because, well, generally all my prints came out relatively fine up until, again, week 3, where everything just died on me. So the easiest way to show that this is actually bent is notice how on this side right here, it's far more away from the top compared to right here where it's more closer. So that's the easiest way right there to see that it's bent. And before anyone says that it's the actual hot end that's bent, I'm going to go and disprove that right now. Again, I'm just going to hold it in my hands. And then I'm going to try and line it as straight as possible. And as you can see, the hot end itself, again, I don't know how well it's coming off on video, the hot end itself, or whatever you want to call this thing, is actually nice and straight. It's actually this right here that got bent. So again, I don't know exactly how this happened. I don't know if I just got a defective unit. But either way, well, I mean, I know how this happened. One too many bashes with the whatever I was printing. But I don't know why that caused this whole piece to just get bent so severely. So if it isn't obvious that it's bent, I'll make it even more obvious. Now, obviously this isn't really scientific, but this is the best I can do to really show how severely bent it is. So I have a piece of popsicle stick right here with 2 edges. One edges that go right here to the outer edge of the little vents right here, and one that more or less lines up with the top notch of the whatever you call this piece right here. So this is where everything more or less aligns. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip it and go to this side right here. Give me a quick sec. Now I have it butt up and got the exact same way as I did on the other side. I have it more or less aligned. And as you can see, on this side right here, the edge is completely off. It's just, well, I mean, you can see what it's doing. So again, I don't know if I just got a bad unit or this is something I need to deal with as I print. And if this is something I need to deal with as I print, then how the heck am I going to make sure that if I need to realign this thing, how do I make sure it's properly realigned again? Because again, I don't know if this is just a bad head unit or what. But either way, this whole piece right here is bent. And more than likely, because that little piece is bent, everything in here just got ground to a halt. And what makes it even worse is that sometimes when I'll go to actually just manually get this thing to feed, it'll still sound like it's stuck with something when there's nothing in here. Now, with that said, the whole tool end does need to be replaced because I'm fairly certain I did some type of internal damage to at least a few little flex cables. And obviously the little tube thing for the AMS thing, you can actually see the part of it is actually just embedded right in there. So this whole piece needs to get replaced anyways. But like I said, I'm fairly certain this part right here getting bent is what just threw everything out of whack and eventually just caused the whole printer to just stop working. Again, though, I don't know for certain. I'm not the one that made this printer, and this is the first time I'm working with one of these printers. But again, since someone from Bambu is helping me out, I very much want to point this part out at the very beginning of the video, or in the beginning of the video, instead of them having to go like, what, 30 minutes in? So to the person helping me rebuild my printer, obviously I need a new tool head. I mean, it's not just because I need a new belt, but the whole unit itself is just cacked, which kind of sucks. But then again, if this ends up being the actual full-on issue, then I'll just fully replace this. Obviously, like I said, this is main part number one I want to get fixed before I do anything else. But again, this is what I wanted to bring in. So I don't think there's anything else I want to talk about, but I'll come back if I can think of anything. I really can't think of anything else, so I'll just stop the intro of the video here, and the next part will be me just actually going through the whole process of testing everything and then putting it back together in a state to where I can actually work on it and or test it out and make sure everything works. And again, as you can see right here, everything does technically work. So with that said, I have done the first step of what the person was wanting me to do, rebuild it to the best of my abilities, and we'll go on from there. And hopefully in the next couple of months, I'll be able to fully rebuild this printer and get it back into a working state again. And hopefully when that happens, I don't have any weird issues like I did with this tool head, because I'm fairly certain this is the reason why everything just went to crap. Some time has passed since I've had my moment with my 3D printer. I've also calmed down enough to where I can think rationally again. And I've contacted Bambu and see if there was some way I could possibly rebuild this thing. They told me to put it back together to a state to where it can, I guess, kind of work, and then go from there. So that's currently what I'm doing. I'll also be linking this video to the person that's helping me out. So with that said, first things first, I need power at the main board. And as you can see, the main board is powered up. And the printer itself, it very much knows there's something wrong. Now, hopefully this thing will be fully fixable. It even still has all my prints I did before and whatnot. It theoretically should be, but I do have a few little issues. Mainly this port right here is needing to be like completely desoldered and redone and whatnot. So this is going to be an adventure in its own right. I think the USB-C port is just fine though. Unfortunately, I believe this port also does like the sensing stuff for like the tool head and whatnot. This is just nothing more than the webcam and light. I would completely ignore it, but since I think this thing does other things also, I gotta be very cautious around this. When it comes to this guy, though, I don't know exactly what I'm going to do. I'm probably just going to rip off this plastic and just take some tweezers and just hold it down like that as I bend it. And then somehow reattach that little solder piece right there. Now, as you can also see, that part right there is lifted, but it is still connected to the board itself. So I'm fairly certain that once I kind of fix this thing up or just remove enough of this plastic where I can insert one of the little plugs, it theoretically should work. But again, I need to put this thing back together in a state where I can even see if it does anything in the first place. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to plug everything back in, excluding all of the main power stuff and whatnot, like the heat bed, tool head, and whatnot. And I'm going to try and see if I can reconnect all those wires I cut, just again to see if I can get something to happen. Technically, I think everything should still more or less work. It's just that I still will need parts that'll need to get replaced. I know I'll need a new top gantry. I know I need a new print head, then a whole new tool head with the belt and whatnot, because I cut the belt in my infinite rage and whatnot, because again, at the time I wasn't thinking right. But again, I'll deal with all that stuff when I actually see if I can get this thing to do anything in the first place. So I'm going to put this thing back together enough to where I can just see if the motors function. And if the motors still function, then at the very least we have something, and that means the main board is in full working order, even with this guy, but in the current state it's in. So with that said, I'm going to get this thing put back together off camera into a testable state, and I will come back. Alright, got it kind of set up. I got a main board in here. I have these two wires hooked up. I have this hooked up, but that should not activate because, again, there's no power going to it. Only power to the main board. I did hear a little bit of a clunk coming from something in here, so something seems to be connected. So with that said, I got two wires here, and I don't know what one. I'm fairly certain this one right here is the motor wire. What this one does, I don't know. Let's see, where does this one go to? Does it actually connect to this? No, it does not. It connects to something else. So with that said, obviously it still thinks, or obviously it knows there's stuff wrong. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, oh, looks like I don't have a, looks like I lost at least one error. So I'm going to dump this thing into maintenance mode and come back. Alright, so what I want to do is I just want to see if the bed one will move. Shut up. Shut up. You ain't homing shit. But I hear something moving. So let me flip it over. Alright, let's see if it does anything. Oh yeah, it is moving. So this one here is moving, which is good. Though, not that well. Just for shits and giggles. You crying about homing? Let's see if you do something. Nah, you ain't doing squat. Okay, now it's just stuck. Forcibly, but whatever. I was trying to do something. So, at the very least, this one seems to be working, though maybe the belt needs to be retightened. Because I did a number on this printer, unfortunately. So the next step for me to do is to attach the gantry, get all those wires connected, and see what happens then. I also need to resolder in that wire harness, so that's going to be a bit of a bitch. But yeah, like I said, I did a number on this thing. I'm wanting to repair it, but again, I need to see what exactly is wrong. Again, I know I need a new gantry, but at the very least, I just want to see what's going on. I'm doing what they're telling me to do. So with that said, I'll come back in a little while. Alright, I decided to do a little mucking about on this thing for a little bit. And this is definitely bent. As you can see, the belt here is not functioning right, or is not straight like it should be. It seems to be relatively, nope, it's not even straight on this side neither. So this whole piece right here might need to be replaced. I don't even know if this needs to be replaced. The motor, from what I can tell, still works. I don't know if the motor is bent, but if you wanted to get a good idea of how much force I extruded onto this printer while I was having my moment, I had enough to where I think I basically bent every single piece that needed to be at a 90 out of whack. Though it would be kind of cool to see if I can actually get this printer to work in the state it's in, if I can manage to get it into a printable state. But that will require me to rewire a bunch of harnesses and whatnot. That's something that is not outside my knowledge set. That is something I can very much do. And look, I can even rewire this thing up. The only reason why I don't want to do that is because this is God only knows how many amps running through that cable, and I don't want to have something just go poof and the thing catching on fire. But then again, it would kind of make sense for me to at least do it that way, because I do kind of need to punish myself for destroying this thing in the state it's in and try and reuse as many components as I can on this thing to get it into a printable state. That's kind of what I want to do. But again, I need to see what else is wrong. So, well, this is definitely, yeah, like I said, I did a number on this thing. So to the person over at Bambu watching this video, another thing I'll definitely be needing right out of the gate is basically all the freaking screws to screw everything back together. I was not in a very good mood when I did my number on this thing. So with that said, I'll get all those wires resoldered and get the harnesses rebuilt. I'm not going to redo the harnesses for this, at least not yet. But I'm going to do all the main motor harnesses. I'm going to see if maybe I can get the USB-C port running if I didn't destroy that, or not destroy. I don't think I deleted that cable, but I know I deleted at least one round of cables, and I think that may have been for the heat bed, but I can't remember. So yeah, this video is already going to be a long video, sorry. So I'll come back in a little while when I'm at a state to where I can actually do more testing. All right, obviously people are probably pointing out that the USB-C right here is actually for the hot end. I just figured that out because this one right here is the camera and whatnot. Now, since I don't care about the camera, again, I'm sorry, Bambu, but I just don't care for it. I completely removed it from my printer. I don't use it. I actually have a separate camera specifically set up for monitoring my prints. I'm sorry, Bambu, but the camera in this thing, let's be very honest here for a brief bit. The camera on this thing is just garbage. If it was actually a good camera, I would use it, but the camera on this thing is literal e-waste. So with that said, I pulled it off. I don't need it. Looks like this guy right here is busted. Is this axis right here. So I got this axis right here plugged in, and I'm going to fire the thing up again, and we're going to see if this axis moves. All right, let's see what the old assistant here says. It's gone down to 1 page now, so we're good there. So I'm going to make sure this thing's back in maintenance mode and come back. All right, it is now back in maintenance mode. So I'm going to go here, and it's the Z-axis. Z-axis is still moving, which is good. So let's just see what happens when I try to home it. It tries to do something, but it gives up. So at the very least, this motor here works. Z-axis works. So I want to see if I can somehow get this port right here, like I mentioned, fixed up to where I can test it. Again, my soldering skills is pretty atrocious, but all I really need to do is just reattach that leg right there and just remove all this plastic and grind away some plastic on that piece right there, and it'll still work. It'll look ugly, but let's be quite honest, how often are we flipping over our printers to look at a cable? So with that said, I'm going to pull this board out. I'm going to try and work on this port right here and see if I can get this guy right here to function. And once I get that up and running, then theoretically, at the very least, all motors will work. It still won't home because I don't have the print head on here and whatnot. And even if I could, there's no way to get the thing to actually move because, like I mentioned, infinite wisdom, again, I cut the little belt. So with that said, again, I will get this situated again off camera and I will come back. All right, got all this wired up. I got it plugged in. So let's see what this thing says now. Okay, it still says there are some issues. So it says that there's still an open circuit. So I bet this motor still will not work. So with that said, let's give it a sec. All right, let's see what happens. I hear nothing. But if I do it for the other ones, that one moves and that one moves. But obviously, this one's doing nothing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip the two grays around and see if that happens or see if that changes anything. And if I still have issues, then I will just do something about this. All right, flip the cables. Let's see what happens. I still hear nothing. And of course, if I do it on the other ones, I hear movement. And that one I hear and see movement. So I'm going to, I'm just going to see if I like somehow either completely desolder this or like make sure everything's more properly soldered. So I'll come back in a little while. I didn't catch it, but I caught a chime. So I guess we're now Apple approved. So with that said, it's still not doing anything. I'm not hearing anything. I heard it chime. So what does the old thing here say? Okay, so now it's just toolhead stuff. So apparently now this is making a proper contact. So I have resolved this little issue right here, but I'm still not getting any motor movement. Did I actually somehow physically jam the motor? It feels like I jammed the motor unless it requires that much force to do anything or I'm not hitting something right. It's possible I jammed that motor, which is weird considering all I did to this end was just bash right here and then just wrench on this side right here. The motor was still fully turning, but again, it's also possible because again I switched these over, so I'm going to swap them again and see if they do anything. But the other error is now gone, and now it's just the toolhead issues and whatnot. I'm actually kind of surprised it's not giving anything about the heat bed, but at least we're getting somewhere. But with all that said, I'm actually going to be a little away from this thing for a bit because I got other chores to do around the house, a.e. mowing the lawn. So I'm going to go and get that done before all this rain we're supposed to have comes in, which is never going to happen because the weather people can never make up their minds, but gotta get it done and make some money. I do want to apologize for the noise in the background. I have my window unit open or on. I just got done mowing the lawn and I'm still a little hot. With that said, I want to quickly bring in the hot end or the main head unit or whatever you want to call this thing. So one thing I've noticed, and I don't know if I actually mentioned this on the original video where I just went full ape on this thing, is the head itself is actually bent. It's ever so slight, but it's not dead center anymore. It's hard to really show it off, but it is not center. So I'm going to figure out a way to kind of show exactly what I'm talking about. So give me a little bit. All right, so this is for the person that is helping me out with repairing my A1. And also just generally people also can chime in on this. With that said, when I uploaded the video of me going ape on this thing, I mentioned that I have a high chance, or I think I may have actually truly figured out why my A1 decided to give up on me. The head itself, the actual unit, is bent. It's hard to show, but if you look at it, again, I'm trying to keep it as straight as possible. Yeah, like I said, it's really hard, but hopefully you can see it. The actual, well, you can see it right here. Again, it's all bent. And it's not the actual head itself or the heat end. It's the little piece down here that's bent. It's bent ever so slightly. And because of that, that is more than likely why everything was not working right with this, with my printer. Which means what I stated earlier about changing out the print heads would not fix the issue. I think I may have been unintentionally right, and I didn't know about it up until just now. So to make it even more prudent that this is bent, give me a quick sec. Now, obviously, this is not scientific, but it's more than enough to kind of show what I'm talking about. So here I have a little mark that lines up with the inner edge of the cooling fins right here. So I have this as flat as possible. I butt it against the head. And as you can see, ooh, it's way off. Am I using the wrong end? I think I'm using the wrong end. There we go. That's the actual end I need to use. So let's try this again. Full flat. And as you can see, butted up against the head here. Flat as it can be on the cooling plate. And it's just ever so slightly shy of the very right there. It's lined up about at the very edge of the dot, at the outer edge. And it lines up with this little piece right there. So that's where it sits on this side. So I take it, I flip it, give me a second. And I do the same thing again. I have it flat and I butt it against the print of the little head. As you can see, it is nowhere close to center. And of course, I actually have two little dots right here. Here's another little dot. I didn't want to make double check or double certain that everything's actually going to work right or lining up properly. So I take this dot. I do the same thing. It lines up more or less right about there. I take it, flip it, Again, I put it as flat as possible on the other side. I line it up, and as you can see, it is also nowhere near center. So this whole head here is basically gone. And at the time, I actually didn't know that. I don't remember if I even mentioned it in the video I had of this thing when I was going ape on it. With that said, though, what do I think has happened to cause the head here to get all bent out of shape? Well, my idea or my theory is it was constantly bashing into the supports of my prints I was doing. It will sometimes do it ever so slightly towards a low ting, or other times it'll be I'm just mucking about in my room like playing a video game or something like that, watching a YouTube video, and I just hear that thing make a loud crack noise. And every single time it does that, I have to go out into the kitchen and make sure nothing happened. So that was something I was experiencing basically right out of the box. And the first print I did, the second print I did, which was the obligatory Big Benchy. The first print I did was obviously the little speed benchy they have already set up in the printer. That one printed out completely fine. I don't remember if it actually collided or anything on that. But this one right here, it was colliding all the time or nearly all the time. But of course, at the time, I didn't know that this is okay or not. So that's my theory of why the head is bent. It just kept on colliding, and eventually it collided one too many times, and the whole thing just got bent out of whack. And of course, since it got all bent, everything went to crapping back, and nothing I did worked because I tried unclogging that head multiple times, and nothing worked. And lo and behold, the actual print head itself is bent, quite severely actually. There's also one more thing I want to quickly bring up. One thing I noticed beside the printer before I went full ape mode on the printer was this little rubber thing was to the side. I don't know what this little rubber piece goes to, but I noticed this out the side before I just completely destroyed it. Maybe this coming loose or coming off is what caused everything to go wrong. But then again, I have no idea where this thing came from. I only know if it's needed. I just know that was beside the printer, and that also was when it stopped working. But then again, now since I now know this thing is completely and totally bent, I'm more than likely going to say that is the reason why it's not printing properly. So with that said, what I'm going to do to try and get the board to do anything is, well, the other end is a USB-C port, so I should be able to get it to work. I may just need to flip them around a few times because this is a keyed port, unfortunately, so you can't just go and put it in there willy-nilly. Granted, it also could just be to make it so it can stop moving around, but I'm saying this is a keyed port. So to test this, I do have a USB-C cable I have laying around, and I'm just going to see if I can get to do something with that. What I want to do is I want to figure out which cables for the heat end so I can just fully disconnect the heat end, which is going to probably be, let's see, it's probably going to be that cable. Yeah, it's that cable right there. That's all sealed, so I can't really touch that. Okay. Thanks, Bamboo. You, well, if the board fries, because it's a keyed port, and, well, I can't do anything about it. Never mind, I'm an idiot. It's still a plug. Whatever. This is the first time me popping this thing apart. I don't know what's going on. So I just disconnected the hot end that way. So if the USB cable I'm using is flipped, it doesn't just burn itself up. So with that said, I'm actually not going to charge my phone, and I'm going to take a little bit of a break because I did just get done mowing the lawn and I'm still kind of resting. So I'll see you guys in about an hour or two. Alright, this is not optimal, and for safety reasons, I'm not going to be running this thing that much or that long. But I got the ground, I got the main power voltage and whatnot all wired up. I'm trying to use the exact same gauge I have. I'm just using simple duct tape to act as a barrier and whatnot to keep them all safe. This is something I have done in the past. I know it works, but considering what this is, I would prefer to get proper cabling for this thing. But since again, I'm just trying to get this thing back into a working order so I can test everything, I'm just kind of hodgepodging everything together. So let's see what else I want to talk about. There was something else I wanted to mention. I can't remember what it was. Oh yeah, it's these guys right here. As I mentioned, the heatsink for these are long gone. So I'm gonna have to go onto Amazon and buy some thermal adhesive and some of those little Chinese heatsink things you can buy for like Raspberry Pis and whatnot. Get one of those. That's a good that'll fit the width, and get one that's, and of course somewhat longish and whatnot. That'll be more than enough for theoretically actual full usage if I can passive, or not passive, but active cool it. And considering if I manage to fully revive this thing, I will be active cooling this thing, at least on this side here. Again, there's little vents right here and whatnot, and probably I'm going to do is I'm just going to completely remove all these vents and just have and print out that little thing that people have that can active cool these things. I'll do that, but only after I get this thing fully revived and whatnot. So with that said, I'm going to put the bottom cover on. I'm not going to be able to screw it down because, like I mentioned earlier, I don't have my screws anymore for this thing. So I'm just going to just friction fit it together and whatnot, and it should fire up. Alright, got everything more or less wired up, excluding the hot end or the heat bed and the extruder, which I'll figure out in a little bit. Because now I'm just running everything off mains power. I looked through the wiki they have for repairing this thing, color matched everything, everything's properly soldered, rewired, and everything else. So theoretically, it should just still fire up. Okay, hear noises. Okay, that was definitely not a happy chime, but it did chime. So let's see. One thing it tries to do is try to bed level, or just center. I tried doing something. Okay, that's stuck. That ain't going nowhere. So trying to do something. Well, at the very least, I have mains power. It's running directly off mains power, but still not happy. So I'll just sit and watch it for a little bit and come back if it does something. Alrighty, so I set it back up where I originally had it. Mainly because the inkjet printer that I was having originally to be the replacement, it's also faulty. Unfortunately, I won't be able to repair that, but this has a higher chance. So with that said, what I decided to do is I decided to take the USB-C cable that I was using to power or charge up my long dead MacBook Air that I think I mentioned earlier. I'm going to see if I can use this cable. If this cable doesn't work, I have a few others. I think this is just a USB 2 port in there, so it theoretically should work. But again, as you saw, there is a little key, so I just may need to reverse both this section here and this section here to finally get the head to actually function right. But one thing at a time. Let's see if this thing still fires up. Alright, I heard printer noises. I'll move that. Alright, and we got that. And a sad little chime, but at least it chimes. Oh, speaking of Apple products, I'm also using an Apple cable or mains power Apple cable to have the length necessary to go from here to here. Now, when I get this thing theoretically ever repaired fully and actually in a fully functional state again, I'll be taking this power cable, plugging it into my UPS right there that I got in it specifically for the printer, but it's currently now just being used to keep one of my I believe like this one on battery power if I lose a charge, and obviously my little mini computer and the monitor for the mini computer, because again, I was originally going to be using this area for an inkjet printer, but obviously that don't work. So with that said, now to muck with this thing off camera for a little bit and see what I can do. Alright, don't know why the Apple cable wouldn't work, but the cable from my Red Magic Pro 10 does. So I am now I was getting some form of heat control, or at least temp control, but if I hit extrude and I do this, it does extrude. So it is now theoretically fully working. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure there's nothing in the way, and I'm going to bump the nozzle to 100. Last time I tried doing this, the thing just shut off, and that's because I was not powering it properly. Now, yes, this is going to probably risk those little MOSFETs that aren't cooled, but I need to see if it does anything. Well, no fan kicking on, and none of this. Oh, that's doing something. Well, it's trying to do something, but ain't doing much. Alright, obviously the print head is malfunctioning. It keeps saying it is. Now, when I try to home it, it's also finally erroring out on the heat bed because, oh, would you look at that? There's no heat bed. Why I didn't notice that on boot is interesting, but I'll just wire it all up and I'll just have it like placed out over here somewhere. That way, so if this thing somehow decides to start homing properly, it doesn't just go and bend this all out of whack. Because well, if I can, I'm going to get a whole new replacement of this also. But again, I just need to make sure everything is working. And the only thing that really doesn't seem to be working, obviously, is this piece here. This is definitely not straight anymore. I'm going to need a new one of these. I'm very much going to need at least a new new one of these little guys. This whole, like basically this whole gantry probably needs to be replaced. This whole midsection right here needs to be replaced if it's possible. Maybe it can work like this. I don't know. If it can, then I'll leave it like this just to have that little bit of, it's something I broke but I managed to revive. Unfortunately, I don't think I can rebuild this section because with the way they designed this thing, again though, I don't know for certain. I know I can actually buy a new gantry, so that is possible. But again, I'm doing exactly what they told me to do, and I'm just going to bring you all along the process. Again, this is also for the person that's going to be helping me out to show what I've been doing while I'm trying to get this thing semi-functional again. Alright, it is now the next day. I got the heat bed all wired up again. Now, obviously, this will be getting fully replaced if I fully go through with the repair of this thing like I'm planning to. But for just general testing purposes, this is more than enough to get just the general job done, because if this thing does still heat up, and it does, I'm only going to be heating it up for like maybe 30 seconds at most. Again, mainly because, again, this really isn't safe. But again, I do trust my wiring skills enough to where I can just turn the heat bed on just for long enough to test it and nothing more. With that said, I'm also not going to be running this thing that long because, as we already know, those little MOSFETs, they don't actually have heat sinks on them, so I don't dare run this thing for that long. I just run it long enough to make sure the heat bed works, make sure all the motors work and whatnot, and see if maybe I can get this guy to function again. With that said, though, I have preliminary tested this thing off camera prior to when I'm starting to record right now. So I know it all works, and this is still giving me errors and whatnot. And I'm still thinking it's probably because this right here is just so bent out of whack. Now, it is possible that in my infinite stupid, when I did this to it, I did do something internal, but I looked on the back right here to make sure all the connections are still secure. They are. So it's also possible the reason why the thing's giving me errors still is because I'm not using the original cable. But then again, from what I've been able to see, the original USB cable that goes for this thing is just a USB 2 that's in the USB-C form, but it's also keyed. So I had to flip the USB-C cable around both on this side and this side enough times where I can finally get it to actually register. So again, maybe getting a proper cable will probably fix the error issue. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. I do luckily have the micro SD card, and I'll be able to get in the logs. But first things first, and it dies again. So as you can see, the heat bed sensor seems to be working, and kind of the other one, this guy, might be working, but obviously it still says dual head is malfunctioning. So with that said, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go put this thing into maintenance mode. Give me a sec. Alright, the first thing I want to do is I want to show that the heat bed still works. Now again, this is going to be replaced, so it doesn't really matter, but I'm guessing I'm going to be showing it off that it works because because it's run through the main board and whatnot. So as you can see, the heat bed says it's 23, so the sensors for this one is working, and obviously the tool head is saying 2, which is wrong. But with that said, I'll put it to 50. And it will take a little while, so I'll come back. One thing is for certain, it is taking a little while for it to heat, but if I do this, I can feel it heating up. It's slow, but that is to be expected. But the heat bed is heating up. So since the heat bed is heating up, I'm going to dump it back down to 0. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to show at the very least one of the fans on this still work. So I'm going to hit this. And of course it doesn't want to work. Go figure. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the printer off and I'm going to flip this cable, and then the fan will probably start working. Alright, and this time around the hot end is still saying it's 18, which is kind of correct. But it is still saying dual head malfunction. So this time around it's going to go right into controls here. Fan. And now it's working. Or at least that fan is. So that goes to show, at least proves that this cable here is I guess technically a proprietary, because it needs to be keyed in a certain way for it to function. I don't know why they don't have it properly set to be reversible, but then again, more than likely the reason why they did that is because the amount of power that goes through this little cable to the heat end and whatnot. But then again, other companies have a full reversible USB-C, and they can pump multiple watts through those things, charge laptops and whatnot. So, whatever. So I can now more or less control everything, and if I actually really wanted to, I can hit the extrude here. It's telling me it'll heat it up. I'm not going to. I'm going to hit still load, and as you can see, it is still spinning up. Now here's where things get a little interesting. I tell it to heat the nozzle, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to heat it to 105 if I can get it to respond properly. So it says it's at 0, and now registers I'm going to be setting it to 105. I hear some type of screaming noise, and it sounds like it's coming from this fan right here trying to spin up. But for some reason or another, this fan will not spin up. And that's what it feels like it's trying to do. It sounds like it's coming from the main board, trying to get this fan here to spin up, but obviously it ain't doing anything. And on top of that, this thing actually is getting hot. It's just that for some reason or another, the sensor isn't showing anything happening. So I'm going to let this sit for a bit and come back. All right, so I got a little heat gun. And obviously it's not really going, oh, there we go. Now I can get, if I can actually just do this. As you can tell, it's getting hot. And if I do this, take this little guy out, this might actually not have battery on it. I take this probe and I'm pointing it right there, it's connecting directly to it. And as you can see, the temperature of it is also fully functioning. So this fan the fan right here for cooling is dead. And the actual sensor that senses the heat is also dead. So if I again do this, of course we go into the heat fans right there, the little heat sink. It's not soaking up as much heat, but it is still there. Of course, if I just put to the hot end right there. So technically, this printer is more or less working. It's just that the tool end, for some reason or other, isn't able to sense heat, and this fan here is cooked. So I think that's pretty much the end of that. So I'm actually just going to flip the thing off, and I'm going to let it sit for like 15 minutes. All right, I think I'm going to end the video here. So as you can see, the thing is more or less rebuilt and technically is working, excluding the print head and whatnot. So the main course of action for me is this. I want to get this fixed before I do anything else. I don't care about the actual this right here. I just want the actual unit itself more than likely just replaced outright, because again, this area here is just bent, and I know for a fact it was bent even before I did that to it. So something catastrophic happened to this thing before I had my moment. But again, this whole section here is what I want to get fixed first before I do anything else. So again, I didn't want to apologize for how long this video is, but I do want to document the whole rebuild process because, like I said, the person that's helping me out over at Bambu wanted me to completely rebuild this thing before we go through the next steps. And I did what they wanted me to, so I'll just message them and we'll go from there.